Hey, what's going on, everybody? On today's show, would you trust an AI version of yourself? We know what's coming with AI agents because we've seen things like Operator, what Karl has shown us. And today we're definitely going to show you what you can do to actually clone yourself into an AI assistant. So that begs the question, what's next? Will we soon have our own AI clones out in the world working for us? That's what we're going to talk about today. It's going to be a fun conversation. This is the Day of the AI Show, and today is January 31st, 2025. And with me today, we have Jyunmi, Beth, Andy, Karl, and I'm Brian. Welcome to the show. Thanks for hanging out in the chat. Don't forget, we do this every weekday, Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern. So if you want to be part of the conversations, you can always go over to YouTube and join the live chat with us. We have tons of people to do. We have so many comments now, it's hard for us to keep up, which is kind of a fun problem to have. And so welcome to Justin and Greg and Cisco and Jen, who are already in the chat. Thank you guys for joining us, and make sure you're giving your advice and comments along the way, and we'll bring those into the show. So today is sort of about the idea of AI cloning, guys. And I've been teasing this all week. I definitely have a demo. I will tell you why it missed the mark just a little bit here in a minute, and what I ran into. But I think it's fun to build in public, right? Because it's fun to show not some super polished answer all the time or some version of it and go like, oh, look, it's done. But what I want to share is like my struggles, where I had to make adjustments, what tools I went, why I think some of those tools may not be a good solution going forward. And we'll all kind of learn together. But I think the bigger conversation here is I want to do the demo and show that part of it. But we'll see that you can create an AI assistant that sounds exactly like you. And Karl has definitely already shown us with your demos, Karl, with like Operator and what we think is coming with agents. So we can conceive it like a future, I don't know how near the future is, where it would be possible for people to have AI clones of themselves working on their behalves. And so are we going to be able to adjust to that? Is that something that we will be used to? Will I get used to maybe getting a voice note from Beth that I know isn't Beth, but it's Beth's voice, and it sort of has her mannerisms and her vocal inflections and stuff like that, and she's just sending me a note of instructions on something we need to do for the show, but it's Beth's AI assistant. And is that something we want in the world? Is that helpful? Does it make it better if I hear from Beth and I hear her voice? Or should she just use some other clone voice like Sally, and she's like, or Madge, and some other voice that Beth might do, and it's just an assistant to Beth? So big questions here. There's really no right or wrong. I'll definitely get into the demo here in a minute because I know people, I told them I do it. But what are your guys' thoughts on this as in general? Andy, you're shaking your head. What do you think?
Andy,
Oh, we
you're
can't hear you.
muted.
Try one more
Sorry
time.
about that.
Here it
Yeah,
is.
so I was shaking my head because it made me think about what I would want for a clone of myself, and under what narrow circumstances would I want it to represent me? Because I think there's a big danger, as you described in your example with Beth, sending you messages that are indistinguishable in some respects from her, live voice messages or whatever. I think you lose trust in the communications from that person if you're not getting a sense that it's a really authentic, real-time delivery of some content from that person. Now, the narrow application that I'm kind of excited about is that I would like to have a representation of me that's clearly boxed in what you can access it. But when you go there, it's not me going out with my assistant. It's my assistant can be interacted with, but overtly that you're speaking to the AI, the AI representation of me. But it's got all the same characteristics of me. And so that artificial presentation borrows some authenticity from me in the faithfulness of that representation. But I don't want to have a mini me of Andy going out and operating with the world as if me. That I really want to avoid.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you used me as your example, Brian, because that is sort of a gray area for me, because it's really important for me that people don't have memories of me that I don't have, right? In your example, I sent you a message. I typed it out instead of voice recording it maybe and like sent it
Right.
to you. But But I would prefer Sally, right? Like, I don't mind that Sally has my voice, tweaked a little bit, right? But I would want it to be obvious that you're
Yeah.
not listening to me.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, right? I mean, I see both sides of it, by the way. The narrow view and boxed in version that Andy's talking about, and then the sort of out and open to the world. And in your case, Beth, you said, I might have typed it. Well, today, and that's
But
still
you don't
sort of
know
a
that,
memory, but tomorrow it may be working on your behalf,
right?
right? If you allowed it to, I'm saying, right? And we can,
Right.
we can look at the operator sort of, and again, since Karl has pro, excuse me, peanut butter. If Karl has pro, and when we saw the demos that even he was showing, even at these basic early days of what agents are, we definitely are still human in the loop. But that's as people start to trust it more, and maybe that's the big word here, Beth, is like, how much do you trust it to go out? And is there some version of you, and maybe it's your voice, but it's boxed in, like Andy said, and it can only go so far, and you use it for minor tasks? I think there's like all these weird like caveats and little variables that I like it here, but it can't do this, and it can do this, but it can't do that. I don't know. What do you think, Jimmy?
Well, I think where we're at right now with the technology is definitely in the early steps and things like that. So in the case of, do you want to make your AI clone and have it representing you out there, like Andy was talking about? I'm not a big fan, because I don't think it's developed enough. Do I think having AI correspondence or AI communication, I think that's where we're at, having and I think that's where that tech is really introduced right now, or that level is, here is an AI version of a customer service agent, or handling these incoming calls. For individuals, AI clones, I think that's going to be the longer question that we ask ourselves, is how much do we want to be represented out there? Now, I know earlier on you brought up the idea of, along the lines of self-representation through your AI agent. And we know that as agents become more powerful and more capable to being able to project influence through the internet or our accounts, even as simple as signing up for dinner reservations, or doing something as complicated as running our financials in the background. I know, scary thought, but it would require this level of trust, and this level of, the way I look at it is, think of it like an e-signature, right? Or a digital signature. That took about 20 something years from inception to signing some international acts to allow digital signatures to be considered legal, right? So we've got a few more years, I think, before we reach that point. But the biggest question on my mind regarding that, especially with how well I want to be represented, I'd want more control over that. And so when you're talking about the nuances and cadences, and is it quite there yet? I personally wouldn't feel comfortable enough unless I could build it from top down and have control of the exact way that it can be used. Other than that, it's fun. It's definitely a fun idea.
It's a Pandora's box thing, right? Because we've seen, this would be a great topic for the sci-fi, the AI show that you guys do, the sci-fi show you guys do. Because how many movies, I don't know, a dozen or maybe less, of clones, right? I don't mean like Clone Wars, like Star Wars or something like that. I just mean like somebody accidentally gets a clone. It's a Freaky Friday, but it's a clone, right? And then they're causing chaos in the world, and it's like, well, I didn't say that. That was my clone, and hilariously, hilarity ensues. And so it's a fun script, right? Kind of what you said, Jimmy, like, oh, it's an interesting, fun idea to talk about, but it is a bit of a Pandora's box, because once AI Brian clone is out the door, it's real hard to wrangle him back in. And what can you do? And you may have best intentions to put parameters around that, but that doesn't mean somebody else isn't able to pick up the ball and run with it. So then that leads to this question of our future, which is, how much are we going to be able to put? You mentioned the signature. It used to be, if I had the old John Hancock in blue ink, that stood out. That was legally binding. I clearly took my pen and I signed it or whatever. And of course, we've had robots now that can sign, 1,000 of somebody's signature. That's a thing that's been around forever. But now you were talking about digital e-signatures, and I'm sure that will eventually, if it hasn't already go into the blockchain and more secure ways of validating that. Isn't that sort of what we're going to have to do, or we're going to have some sort of future of that when we're talking about AI, when it comes to things that are distinctive to our personality, our voice, our appearance, both of them together, me speaking on a video and saying something, and in some future state, this could just as easily not be me. It's just a box. I'm talking to you guys, but if it was a fast enough processor, if it was good enough at getting my vocal inflections, if it could get my hand movements and my normal gestures down, which we know AI is moving towards, well, how far away are we from me or all 5 of us all being AI versions of ourselves, carrying on a great conversation just like we are right now? And so then that leads the question to any of y'all, like, well, what do you do about that? Like, where do you put the next level of authenticity if everything is easily replicated or reimagined? It's a bigger question, maybe not, maybe beyond the scope of this particular call, or this call. You can tell I do a lot of Zoom meetings, this conversation. But yeah, I don't know. And of course, the other side of it too is, just to throw this out there, we talked about this before about, in previous shows. Some of us are on the fence. Some of us are pro and for, just in this group, I believe, about future echoes in the house and me being able to talk to my deceased mom. I am pro that. This is a direct line to that. And Andy, I think, like what you were saying, well, if it had parameters, but like, I can't remember, Andy, but is that something you'd be a fan of beyond your time? If you're, God willing, you're around for a long time, but like your grandchildren and your children, or whatever, were able to carry on a conversation with AI Andy, would you set that up today so that they had that in the future? Or you're like, yeah, look, once I'm done, I'm done?
I plan to. I plan to have that available to my children and, to their children. Not that I'm pretty sure they won't spend much time on that. But if they ever have a question about my past or history of their ancestors that I have access to, I would like to have a repository and a representation, just like this video, of me responding in real time to questions that they may ask about the past or about my experience of life. I think that would be a wonderful legacy, and I plan to implement that. I have enough years left, and the technology is catching up quickly.
Yeah.
So there. Now on the agent side, like, we have this vision of these agents going out and about. I think I want to design the personality and the capabilities of my assistant agent, and I don't want it to be limited to who I am and what I think. Right. I'm going to design that one to actually be a counterpart to me, but has access to all of the information that's in my sort of personal history plus knowledge base representation of me. But if the agent goes out there, it's only going to be on its behalf, saying, "Oh, I can check with Andy's knowledge base, and I can respond based on that." But there's always that intermediate translation made clear and apparent to anybody who's interacting with the agent.
Yeah, that makes sense. Karl, any thoughts on this? You're the only one that hasn't chimed in so far.
I was at a meeting a couple days ago, and I think I'm looking at it so the request was, so usually when we present, we're like, hey, you know what, you could extract knowledge from those people who have been in businesses in your company for decades, lots of corporate knowledge, know about processes, know about, very specific subject matter experts. And, there's usually, if you leave, there's no way you can you can't extract that data. So usually we say, hey, there's ways we could do that. So this company wanted to do they wanted to essentially clone their CEO, well, their founder or their current chairman, whatever that is, and have that person's legacy for the company forever. And then this was a weird request. It's like, hey, it'd be cool ideas if we can get a hologram of the of this person, showcasing to this business, like in front of a business or in front of a community. So they want to preserve that legacy, and the company's named after this person, and a lot of things revolve around that person. So then it got me thinking, wait a minute, so are you saying you have multiple versions of you? So you have one for work that people can ask questions against, one for external facing that people can ask questions against, that's a little bit different, takes a little bit of that person's tone and personality, and then do you have like a strategic thinker, than actual business use? So there's like multiple versions of you for different purposes, and you deploy that throughout a business. Kind of weird.
Yeah.
What I was thinking.
Think of Severed. What's the Apple show?
I don't know.
Severance.
Severance. I'm like, it's like a huge show. Yeah, Severance. Anyway, where
I'll probably mana recaps that because I do a lot of mana recaps because I don't watch very many shows anymore. So I just recap the show, and I get it in a very sarcastic manner. So no, seriously, it is amazing. Like it is a big thing. Like I barely watch. There's only certain shows I watch now. It's all recaps, anime recaps, show recaps, movie recaps. And if I'm like, hey, remember that show? I'll be like, name of show, recap. It's there. Somebody has done it, and it's fantastic. I can watch all the shows in about an hour. I can go through. It's 15 minutes long. Sorry. Side note. Anyway. So so it's kind of strange that you can have that, but you can have multiple versions of you too, and depending on the process of that. I think the only caution I have is the same example I used a couple months back is, if a company wants to clone you for very specific purposes, then who owns that clone? You or the company who's like loaded it with data, talk, right? You can put brand voice to it. You can, give examples to it. One of the things we love to do is get the subject matter expert or the CEO or business exec to sit down for about an hour or two. We just ask, Claude or ChatGPT, hey, give me a set of questions so I can extract the maximum amount of knowledge for this particular topic or whatever. Have that person answer that question by themselves. I don't care. Take the transcript. That's your knowledge source. That's one knowledge source. Brand, vision, mission, company profile. You've literally now got like the kind of business version of that person to do a very specific thing in that very specific method. So if you add that to an avatar, that could be kind of the same thing. So it from a business use case, it's very interesting, but then it's like, who owns that piece? Unless you own the business, and then it could be like that person that,
No, it's like naming rights, right?
Yeah.
I mean, even 11 Labs has that. And I'll show that here in a second when I pull up the screen. What I went through with the 11 Labs, really specific about what I'm giving the rights to when I make my voice public, which ultimately I probably didn't have to do for this. I'll explain in a second where I ran into issues with that. But anyway, the naming rights and what it does. In fact, there's even a toggle on there that says that 11 Labs will look at the content being created, and if it's shouldn't be the type of content that I would want to use, that it'll block it from using my voice, which is interesting, right? Because if you're a voice actor and you put your voice out there, then it can be used for commercials and, but those are rights. That person obviously has naming rights to it. I think what you're saying, Karl, you mentioned this before with the companies, if I create 100 training videos and I leave the company, and 10 years later, I noticed that not only are the same 100 training videos still there, but there's 100 more with me leading the training videos. And you go, whoa, I haven't been at the company in 10 years. And they say, yeah, but when you were here, we retain the rights to use your
Yep.
likeness, your name, image, and likeness. And so we were able to do this in perpetuity because you didn't sign it off. You didn't say we couldn't use it after 3 years or that we would have to replace it or whatever. Now, the reality is it in the future should be very easy to replace me with some other AI avatar. So I don't know why a business would want to do that unless you're a Walt Disney or your voice that's a person that's, that CEO or CXO is linked directly to that company. And there's like a strong bond there where you would want that voice to still be representing them. For most people, I would think the actually nice part about this is, let's take the example again of 100 training videos. Okay, I do this at my company. I leave, I go on, take on another job or whatever. And then that company goes, oh, I don't really want to have Brian's voice and talking head on there. So we'll just swap it out really quick. And the nice part is for AI, that should be a fairly easy process in the future where you literally go select all, change voice and tone, and boom, I'm gone. And now there's an AI replacement of that.
Yep.
The other thing I was going to say too, is you were talking about this, Karl, about, what do you guys think about this in terms of, because you said multiple versions of me out there. And that made me think of code switching. And code switching is just when we take on other personality traits for ourselves. I will give you a quick example. I would talk differently when I was at the firehouse. You could consider that code switching. I was around a different type of people. It was a certain type of people. And so I would be different in the firehouse. Not so much so that my wife would have walked in the firehouse and been like, who are you pretending to be? But there was a difference. And I was fully aware of it. When I would be around my other friends, I might be different. So we all code switch to a certain extent. Is this just the AI version of that, where there's different versions of me operating out there, but they're perhaps aligned a little bit better with the audience that I'm interacting with?
No.
No,
It's
there
not.
shouldn't.
No, it is not the version of that, because you are aware when you are code switching. I mean, you may
Right.
not be aware consciously saying I need to code switch now, but you are engaged in that in that interaction. When your AI twin is going out, then you don't have the awareness of that interaction. So even if you've code switched to be perfect in that environment, you still have a self-representation that you don't control, right? Because what we're talking about is like what you were telling us about was the AI trained on 9 of our shows, maybe you said.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, for this demo.
and then be able to have a conversation with it about the shows. Like, that's pretty great, right? Yay. But is there someone going to ask, what's your favorite cheesecake recipe? And we know that AI, for the most part, right now, is going to give an answer to that, right?
We'll
Because
test it
that
out, by the way. We'll find out in about a second.
or
here.
like Brian, give me a firefighter story, right? Like
That it will do.
There and that kind of thing. Like, there may be some firefighter stories, but as we all know, like when we what Karl likes, first thing that Karl wants to do is break it. Tell me
Yeah.
about the time that you were a firefighter in Massachusetts
Right.
in 1902.
Yeah.
And is the AI going to do that?
It's a good question. I mean, my simple
That
demo
kind of
today,
thing.
let's find out. I mean, that's the answer to that. I do want to bring this up really quick. Oh man, see, this is where I got to scroll because I waited too long. It was one of Gwen's comments. Oh man, sorry guys. This is the nice part about everybody commenting on the show. She was saying we were okay. So this goes back a little bit, Andy. We were talking about you saying, and I am, by the way, I agree with Andy on the idea of having some digital AI representation me past my time. And I've said that I wish I had that. I've said this publicly, that I wish I had that for my mom who passed away in 2008. I wish I had it for my daughter, so my daughter could talk to an AI representation of my mom. It's just my opinion on that. But they were asking in the comments, like, would it have real-time information? Would this AI representation of my mom in this hypothetical situation, she passed in 2008, would she have understanding of world things past 2008? And then Gwen was saying, like, is that really healthy? Times change rapidly. What we think now might not work well in the future, which could lead to trouble. Gwen, I 100% agree. And I'll put myself out there as an example. There were words that I used in the 90s that are no longer acceptable to be used. Now, it wasn't like words that weren't acceptable in the 90s, but there was a word that started with an R and there was a word that started with an F. And I would say those freely to my friends in the 90s and all the little boys hanging out or whatever, because these were words we use. I don't want my future AI using those words. When they were no longer okay, they were no longer okay, and that's the end of it. So I agree with you, Gwen, on that. I just wanted to pull that comment back up because yeah, in that particular case, if it existed for my mom from 2008, I would want her knowledge cut off quite literally to be 2008, August 8th of 2008, 8808, right? That's it. Doop. So she can talk to things, and then if somebody says, well, what do you think about the for her, it would probably have been like what the first iPhone was out in 2008 or something like that. Like sort of early on, Facebook was early on. If you asked her about Twitter or TikTok or something, she would say, I don't, politely, you would expect my mom's AI to say something like, well, I don't know about that. That might have happened after 2008. I know what I know up to this point. And I think there would be a more healthy cutoff to do that. So I thought it was an interesting comment. Thank you, Gwen, and everybody else. But my answer would be cut off the knowledge base, because you don't want to find out that old grandpa is using old grandpa words in the AI and everybody going, ooh, that's not okay. AI grandpa, you can't say that.
But now you're actually moving into an area about how are you editing it, right, Andy? So I don't know that you're using horrible words, but the ways that you are collecting the information that you would want to give to your progeny is based in the language that you use, right?
Yeah, my imagination is that sometime over the next couple of years, I'll build an app that will basically, over the course of several years following, it will interrogate me about various dimensions of my life. And I will consciously be speaking in the outward facing, not private, unfettered approach. I'm going to be speaking from the stance that I want to portray myself in going forward. So it's not going to have all the rough edges, although I may discuss some of those and acknowledge those, but it's not going to present those. So I'll be very deliberate about it, and as a result, I don't think that my AI representation in the future is going to end up doing something untoward or politically incorrect.
Okay, I just thought of something here, because I remember a couple months ago I was talking about, hey, AI agents. There was Bumble, and Whitney Wolf Herd from Bumble was talking about agent to agent. So I was like, wait a minute, will we start seeing agent to agent like romances? So it's like, so you create your avatar who's romancing another avatar,
100%.
but you have absolutely nothing to do with that.
100%.
And it's their own kind of, you can create like a show, but that raises, you're like, wait a minute, you yourself, like the real you, has nothing to do with what your avatar is doing in terms of that aspect. So I'm curious to know, it's like, and then your avatar or multiple versions of you is having like multiple romantic relationships with other avatars.
Yeah, concurrently.
Concurrently.
Yeah.
You yourself you're like, I have no interest in any of these avatars. I don't know what that would be, but I'm sure it's some weird business that someone's gonna come up with, and be very interested to learn about, because we hear about people getting more attached. If you have a chance, go listen to in Big Technology Podcast, listen to Dennis Hassabis, the interview with him, because he was asked that question about the emotional attachment people have to large language models who understand you more and more and more, especially feed it more and more data and has more memory. So you get that attachment to it. So, but I'm also thinking it's like, if you have an independent avatar, what are romantically, but like who's responsible for the actions of that avatar, if they even have that agent capability to act on your behalf? Is it still you? Or if your agent acted like some weird way, or got hacked by something, like what would be the ramifications then? So just curious to just had that weird thought about that.
Go, Jimmy.
Well, there's two things that came up as soon as you mentioned that. Number one, there's either a movie that just came out or is coming out really soon that actually talks about that exact situation.
Really?
It's two AIs. I think it's a at the end of the world kind of thing, where they kind of take on more human personas and then get into a relationship. It's a whole thing. It should be a fun movie. The second thing is you're completely right. The more interactive and in those particular kinds of spaces, people will have it's that same drive for reality TV, right? This is a different reality. It's a safer way to interact and explore those concepts. So people will eat that up. So yes, not only will you have avatars getting romantically involved with other avatars, but it'll be people watching that. So just imagine a slew of YouTube channels or Netflix specials of just these avatars, reality TV, and then that goes on to the point of like, well, once we've created a larger simulation, we're already doing now like that. Like, was it Project Odyssey or whatnot, where they had the Minecraft and people were interacting on that social level?
Yeah,
that's just the early steps of that. So yeah, taking the concept of what an AI or simulated version of a person is, it's a great thought experiment. There's philosophical questions, societal questions, and things like that. And that might just be the reasons to engage in that. Now, do I necessarily want to see a version of me doing this? I don't know. It goes back to what I think some people in the chat were saying is, I think our implementation at this point is, can we have it local? Can I control the exact things that it does? And moving beyond that point is going to be a big step for people in general.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't even go the whole point about the entertainment side of that. And then you talked about that. I was like, oh God, Love is Blind or Love Island or whatever but it's all simulations, and like, oh God, that's just like, people are going to be into that, but like, yeah, no thanks.
I'm just looking at the comment from Gareth, right? Did you hear AI Eric broke up with AI Tyne? And I was like, are they going to break up in real life? Both of them don't even, they're like, they have no clue that their AIs are even in a relationship. You're like, who is, that one? Yeah. That one. So it's funny because then you can make an avatar that is, if you yourself is more reserved and not like introverted, you can make an avatar of like a perception of what you perhaps an extrovert version of you. Not that you'll ever want to be, but you can live vicariously through that extroverted, and then that extrovert could have like, be the promiscuous version of you. But then there's another one that there's just so many things that you could, create of versions of yourself that you want to, I know there'll be a LARP version of yourself, which the first thing is like, that's hilarious if you create a LARP version of you, like wanting to do like these things. But then there's some things that are like, hey, wait a minute, wouldn't I want to do them? Not my avatar. So is it like a continuous running of, just reminds me of the Office episode where Dwight creates a version of himself, but he's still a assistant to the regional manager in his like virtual world, but he can just fly. I don't know if you remember that episode. So is it multiple versions of that?
I think it's, I want to pull up the demo here before we get too late into it. So I'm going to do that in a second. But I think what I heard you say when I heard, like, before Jimmy talked about the entertainment, I think there is some version of that with the dating apps, Bumble or whatever, where, and then if you take Nvidia's concept of like Cosmos, where your AI avatar, but not you, but like your assistant, right? Like, because you don't want it to be representing you personally, back to Beth's point about that, but maybe an assistant. Brian's assistant is now going out and talking to many other assistants, but like Cosmos, it's doing it concurrently and running through digital twin type scenarios where it's running through 1,000 different variations and scenarios where these two people would interact in real life. And then maybe through that, it's just it's filtering out people that R2 agents are not getting along with, for lack of a better term. And then what I think Bumble will feed back to us through the algorithm is, hey, not just that they entered this thing and they entered this thing. No, also we've run you through 1,000 different simulations. And these are now the people that you are most likely to still be dating in 3 to 6 months. Right.
Yeah.
So I think it's something like that. I think
Totally.
so.
We talked about that, like, I think episode 100,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
concept of having your two romantic agents talking to each other, making sure all the boxes are checked, adding in the whole, oh, we're going to go through 1,000 simulations and variations. I think that could be easily sold to people. It's like, not only the kind of questions you're answering, but because it's a deep enough representation of each other, we have a high percentage chance that this will be successful. So now you can invest your time, that kind of
Why go
sales
out to dinner and have a horrible first date if you don't have to,
Exactly.
I mean, that's the, like, I would imagine that's the thing. I was either married or already with Amanda pre-dating apps, so I never had to deal with that, but that's where I see that kind of going for sure. Okay, I'm gonna pull up my screen really quick, and we're gonna look at a couple different examples here, because we talked about all the things that could happen in the future. Let's talk about what can actually happen today. So this is, let me get some of this off my screen so I can see. So a couple pieces that we need here if you were going to put something like this in place today. Now, we're not talking about an assistant going out in the world and doing agent-like stuff. We're just simply talking about an AI assistant that you could have a conversation with, like advanced voice mode in ChatGPT. In fact, that's what this will end up looking like. So my intent was to create an assistant, see how far I could go, to create an assistant that sounded like me and was answering and talking and engaging in discussions with the person talking to it, like advanced voice mode, about our show. This is something we've wanted to do for a while for the Daily AI Show, is not necessarily my voice or Andy's voice or Beth's voice, but have an AI assistant that could do this. And so I wanted to see how far we could go today. And so first thing I did was start with 11 Labs. There's others out there, but I'm going to just play a little clip of my higher end trained voice, and you guys can decide, anybody listening can decide for yourself whether you feel like this is a good representation of me or not. But I had to submit 3 hours of voice. Luckily for this show, that is not a problem. So I submitted 3 hours of voice. It took about 6 hours for it to train, and this is about what it sounds like. So we'll just play a little clip here. Can we play generate speech? Do I have to generate it again? I thought AI is already changing the job market, and it's only going to accelerate. The World Economic Forum's to 78 million jobs, which sounds positive, but it doesn't mean everyone will benefit. Population growth and changing skill demands mean that just because there are more jobs overall doesn't mean that they will be evenly available. The people who succeed in this shift will be those who understand how to work with AI, not those who try to ignore it. Okay, so general first impressions. I mean, it's AI. It sounds like AI to me, but it's definitely my voice. I mean, I think we can agree it's a pretty good representation of my voice up until this point. So that was the first thing I did. Then I actually had to deploy that somewhere. So that's when I went over to a company called Synthflow. Synthflow is really actually meant to, here, let me update it. It does this to me every single time. Synthflow is meant to do inbound and outbound calls, but they do have a widget function to it as well. And basically, I created this DOS agent. So just let's look really quickly at what this looks like. So this DOS agent has a knowledge base of Daily AI Show transcripts, but I didn't want to give it full transcripts because I felt like that was just going to be too much. And something we've learned through a project that Andy has been heading is this idea of maybe kind of creating taxonomies, which is to say, I don't have to give you the whole transcript from shows 100 through 380, 390 today. As of today, but maybe I can create these taxonomies that give you the general idea of what was going on. So what I did was I shared things that look like this. And I only did it for 9 shows. So this is not, you can't get all 400 shows almost of it. But this is taxonomy for episodes 384, World Economic Forum Jobs Report. That's one that Andy and I did together, I believe. I think it was just the two of us. And so it gives you context, some key findings, skills, things we talked about. It really sort of breaks down the whole show into all the different topics and parts and pieces. And then it goes into tools and technologies mentioned by us, implied context, right? So Andy and I probably talked about this stuff. And then key people, organizations mentioned. We talked about Kevin Wheel at one point. Sinead, is not Cindy Bovell. And then it looks like we talked maybe about some other organizations as well. And then that's basically it for the show, because what we want this Synthflow to do is to look at all those, and then you have to create this prompt that goes along it. Now, my intent was to actually turn on and talk to myself as the AI assistant. Unfortunately, because of Synthflow, not because it's not possible, but because I'll show you, in fact, right here in this Chris 11 Labs, where you see edit right here, there should be an option for me to pick my own voice. I've API connected it. I've done all the things, and I've looked at all the blogs, and frankly, it's super, super annoying to me that it's not available. But so we're going to have Chris, which is an 11 Labs voice, but unfortunately, it's not my voice for this particular demo. But let's look really quick at what you have to do on the back end, because what you have to do is you can see a greeting here. Hey, it's Brian. What AI topic do you want to learn about today? Let me know if you need some suggestions from past shows. That's how I wanted to start the conversation. And because I don't expect somebody who's using this AI assistant, maybe on our website, to really understand all the topics we talked about. So I want the AI assistant to get the conversation going. And so then we have this basically prompt that I had to work on for a little bit. It wasn't just a done and done. They do have a copilot that works just like Replit, that asks you a ton of questions and will build this prompt for you. I found that prompt, when it was all said and done, didn't exactly hit the mark. And so I had to bring it into ChatGPT, and with my own prompting skills, go back and forth and get it to this point. But you can kind of see what the gist of it is. It's basically pointing at the taxonomy with some behavioral guidelines. Okay. And it's talking about like use of taxonomy structure. So it's saying, hey, this is where you're going to find this stuff. Every one of these taxonomies looks the same. So we're getting that consistency in there to make sure that when it goes to retrieve this information, it's always going to look at the same stuff. And so we give it some headers to do that. Customizable tone talks about what kind of, intro we want to be in there. Let's see, it gives some examples. And then you'll notice down here, like when out of scope. That topic isn't covered in the episodes or the taxonomy we have in the knowledge base. Would you like me to explore related topics or help in a different way? So we're trying to box it in a little bit, like Andy was talking about. So now what we can do is I was going to deploy this on the website. So this is our website, and you can actually see it right. Oh, sorry, not sharing my screen. There you go. This is our basic website that we know we have to update, so don't make fun of it. And then at the bottom here, I was actually going to embed this, and you actually can embed this. In fact, I'll just do it really quick. The problem is if like 40 people hit this right away, it would time out. But let's just go ahead and do it really quick. Boom, there you go. There's our AI assistant. Now it's going to sound like Chris's voice, not mine, but I should be able to start a call right now, and let's just ask it some questions from the knowledge base.
What's showing on the screen right now is just the done response from the other website, but now the chat assistant is showing.
Yeah, my mistake on that. Hold on one second. Let me pause it. It looks like it's not showing. Maybe this website is blocking. No, it's got I used this the other day. Let me try one more time. If not, we'll pivot. And error requiring camera or microphone push. Make sure you grant necessary. I did definitely grant necessary permissions. Let's just refresh really quick. Try it one more time. If not, we'll run it from Synthflow. But you can see what it looks like nonetheless. We'll try it one more time here. No, it's giving me an error. I don't know if that's because I'm sharing my screen. It probably has something to do with that. Let me just jump over to Synthflow. And we got the same thing here. So you can see the widget looks identical. So if we had it on the bottom of the website, or if we, it's just giving us a test feature here. So let's go ahead and start it here and see if we can get it to work on share.
Hey, it's Brian. What AI topic do you want to learn about today? Let me know if you need some suggestions from past shows.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. What do you suggest?
How about we dive into the episode from January 17th, 2025, called The Blueprint for America. It explores some fascinating ideas on AI's role in shaping the future of America. Or if you're curious about tech gadgets, there's an episode on AI wearables from January 20th, 2025.
The blueprint sounds good. Who put the blueprint out? Who wrote it?
The Blueprint for America was put out by the American Edge Project. It's a pretty interesting initiative focusing on how AI can influence America's future.
It was actually put out by OpenAI. But tell me some of the key components and what did the two co-hosts talk about on the show that day? Hello?
My mistake.
What were some of the things they talked about on the show about the AI blueprint that day? Well, we had it.
Yeah.
Hey, is this text? Is this using the I think the real time OpenAI's real time API, or is it using TTS like text to speech? Didn't come back. Like, what is it using? Because I think there's a difference between what I've noticed is when we were building our prototype to showcase to customers and whatnot, when we use the OpenAI, the real-time API, that has better recognition. But what we're finding is, and when we use like, I forgot what we're using, it was like a Hugging Face one, but it was still TTS, and then the TTS one sounded a little bit more robotic. So I'm curious to know that. And
Yeah, inside. So I don't know the answer specific to what you're asking about the TTS. I'm not familiar with that. You do have the option to use either the Synthflow voice model, of which I didn't go through all the screens. I certainly could. You have a lot of small tweaks you can make it. So it's interesting. I can take the voice coming from 11 Labs already has certain things in it. If it would allow me to adjust to use my voice in 11 Labs already has certain things that are coming through the API, but then you can further tweak that. You can tweak things such as how fast you or slow you want it to interact. We've seen this before where the initial OpenAI voice models were like cutting you off too fast. If I even pause for a half a second, that's adjustable. Keep in mind that Synthflow is really meant for inbound and outbound calls. So it's meant if you call a number and you get the customer service, this assistant is supposed to be able to help you through certain issues. It also, though, will make outbound calls where you get basically a robocall, but it can talk through you can have the same interaction with it. I only set it up as a widget. It's really cool. I think you can see the use case of it right away. I certainly could expand on this and actually have the knowledge base conceivably taxonomies for all 390 shows through today. I only did 9 of them. And of course, there could be some tweaking on the prompt side. That makes the biggest difference is the prompt side. Now, for us actually deploying a agent or a AI assistant on our website, would I actually use this workflow? Yes to 11 Labs. No, I probably wouldn't use my own voice. We could decide on that or whatever, but that kind of goes back to our voices being out there and beyond the show and whether we would want that or not. More than likely, we would just decide on 2 or 3 different voices, maybe that have similar personalities to us that are not us, right? But I wouldn't use Synthflow to do it. It's prohibitively expensive. But again, it is built for a bigger thing. It's meant for inbound and outbound calls because you can assign phone numbers to this. I'm not showing that side of what it can do. But if you were in the sales side, you could assign phone numbers to it, the whole thing. You can, here's the other thing you could do that's really crazy about it that I don't need to do. Had it started conversing with me and it said, hey, before we get going here, what's your name and email address? And I'll make sure that all this goes to you. It will pull any actions and custom actions that you set up during the interaction. It will extract that data and then kick it off to Zapier or any one other connections, which is pretty powerful because if you're talking to an assistant and you're like, well, I'd like this sent to me. Could I have this whole transcript sent to me because it's really information? Sure. Do you want that sent to your email? Just tell me what it is and I'll make sure that gets done. And as soon as that's pulled in, that action goes out and it would send that email on the behalf of the assistant, which is actually very, very cool, I think.
Doesn't 11 Labs have their agent that can do that though?
They have conversational AI and they have Studio. So I'd have to see. They do have I'm looking at it right now. I mean, they have their conversational AI. I'd have to look and see how it's used and stuff like that.
Because that is the I think I've seen a lot of there's a couple of companies that have that function calling, because then you can put in APIs connected to it and then it can function call whatever as long as you have an API connected to it, and that was the thing, is like, if you're on an e-commerce site, whatever tool you use, it's like, hey, I want to buy this, and then, oh, we only have 4 left, so you only have 2 left, or we have this and this and this, and then, because I think, like, generally what I believe, and I've been talking about this for a while now, is like, instead of the way that you interact with businesses online, to me, is going to change, because it's easier to have full conversations with the business rather than having to go to website, click. Like, you could still do that, but I'd rather just have a full conversation. Hey, what's your price? What's your product? I want to do this. I want to do this. Can you sell it to me? And then you put a little bit of agentic into that and be like, hey, yeah, here's my credit card, or I'm just going to go into your site now, and then, or send whatever it is, whatever that transaction is, you have that capability, instead of having to. And that's sort of like some of the prototypes and the demos that we're showing to prospects. Like, your customers could have full conversations with whether it's your customers or even your prospects online, or your customers who already bought your product. Here's, like, you can create an advisor for it, for them to, hey, how do you use the product? If you have any questions about the product, if you have any issues, because then once you get the video component in, or and then you can show, if it's a physical product, say, hey, something's wrong with it. What do you think? It's like, oh, there's something wrong. So I think, like, that aspect of online and business interaction has the potential to change. It's just that companies need to actually move forward with it.
Yeah.
And then and then let's see how the actual public adopts to it, and if they see it, because it has to be front and center, right? It can't be a little icon chatbot to the right. Most people have noticed, like, gone through the years where it's like, that's just like a HubSpot chatbot, like an old school chatbot. Most people just close it. So I'm thinking, has to be the way that the website or something, your interface with the customer has to be shown front and center, that they
Yeah.
will engage with it, and then, do the conversation. So yeah, there's a lot of companies that have, it's interesting, that have this capability, but to apply it to an actual business use case, it's still call AI calls you. But I'm like,
Yeah.
hey, you got to change that entire concept. But I don't think we're there yet.
Yeah. It's look, all of these pieces and parts. I mean, the demo I just showed, obviously I ran into issues with it, but it's like, it's there, right? When I used it and I wasn't doing the screen share, it was performing flawlessly. I probably had a 5-minute conversation back and forth. It pulled up all the conversations. It uses Socratic questioning, so it was going deeper into the topics, for instance, the wearables or whatever. It wasn't really bound necessarily by exactly what Andy and I would have talked about. It was more about the concepts and the structure, which is what we've always sort of talked about as being a really helpful assistant to the show. Hey, I really heard this show. I heard the show and it really intrigued me, but I want to go farther. Oh, okay. There's an assistant that can not only tell you where the show left off and where we talked about it on the show, but here's some other things that might be valuable to you, and go beyond that. So it's possible. I wouldn't do it again this way. Obviously, there's costs involved with it as well. And then I will tell you I told everybody this before the show started. So before we went live, that to do this, I had to make my 11 Labs voice public and basically usable for costs. I get paid for it, I guess. Probably cents upon cents for the public library, right, of 11 Labs, so other people can use it. And I thought, nobody's going to use it. Yeah, 21 people have used the voice since. So you have to keep that in mind, that I'm now I guess a paid voice actor, and it's something you have to keep in the back of your mind, that it's certainly possible that these 21 people or whatever could be using the voice that I created, that you just heard me write. You saw the transcript for their own purposes, and hopefully those aren't nefarious or otherwise. But if you hear me out there and I'm talking about anything to do with pets, You know, it wasn't me. It was my AI clone, because I would know the first thing to say about it. So anyway, all right. So look, this has been a good conversation. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed it. Really wanted to see this demo go all the way through, but I think it's more important for me to just talk about like where I ran into frustrations with this, and honestly just hit wall after wall. But it's certainly there. And I think in the very near future, you will see some version of this AI assistant that goes along with the daily AI show, and you guys will be able to use, because we want it to exist. We think it'll be valuable for us, but we actually think it'll be valuable for our growing audience as well. So hopefully you guys found that interesting. Obviously, the rest of the conversation about where it's going, what are you comfortable with? Just realizing that it's out there, that people can clone your voices with or without your consent. There's ways to do that. And, what does that mean to you? And probably more than anything else, just think from a security standpoint, this is a great time to have conversations with your friends and family about safe words, for lack of a better term for that, and things that you feel like would authenticate you. Because unfortunately, it's too easy for people to do these phone calls and stuff and call people and say, help, I need help. I need you to send me some money. And it sounds exactly like me. And so we need to have better tool sets and safety sets in order to protect ourselves. Because as you can see, this is not that hard to set up. We have a lot of good conversations coming up next week. Obviously, come back and hang out with us. Thank you to everybody in the comments as always. Thank you for all our subscribers. If you like what we're talking about, we're here, like I said at the beginning of the show, weekdays, Monday through Friday. And we are this is episode 390. So we're coming up on episode 400. I think, Beth, you said it was actually lands on Valentine's Day this week. So in 2 weeks, 2 Fridays from now will be our 400th episode, which will be a fun one. So keep coming back, keep hanging out with us. Likes and subscribes help, obviously. And we'll see you again on Monday. So until then, guys, have a great weekend. Bye.